So 2024, what an incredible election year, right? Billions of people all over the globe heading to the polls, really shaping democracy's future.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
But that massive moment also really put a spotlight on a growing challenge.
You mean AI-generated misinformation, deepfakes?
Exactly. That threat is just getting bigger and bigger. So
Mhm.
for this deep dive, we've pulled together a stack of sources looking right at this. We're focusing particularly on how the European Union is tackling it, some pretty surprising stuff from a big tech platform, and also a look at youth voting here in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, and our mission really is to try and cut through all that noise.
Mhm.
We want to look at some real examples of AI's impact, understand the kinds of measures places like the EU are putting in place,
Right.
and then figure out what it all actually means for, like, the integrity of elections and also how people, especially young people, are engaging with it all.
Okay, let's set the scene a bit then. The scale of 2024, it really was, well, kind of mind-boggling.
It really was.
Over 60 countries, half the world's population, more than 4 billion voters. Presidential, legislative, local, everything.
And key areas. I mean, Europe, obviously,
Yeah.
with the big EU elections across, 27 plus countries?
Yeah.
Plus Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah, and then here in the U.S., of course, November 5th, presidential race, 160 million registered voters. Just massive, globally.
And to really get into this, we probably need to be clear on the terms, right? Misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes.
Good point. They get thrown around a lot.
Yeah. So misinformation, that's basically just wrong information. Could be an honest mistake.
Okay.
Disinformation, though, that's different. That's deliberately created, deliberately spread, specifically to deceive people.
Like malicious intent.
Right. And deepfakes, they're a specific type of disinformation. AI-generated stuff, audio, video, images that looks incredibly real.
And that's the scary part, isn't it? How real they look.
It is. And that's why they're such a threat. They hit right at the heart of election integrity because they make us doubt what we're seeing and hearing. You add that to how easily stuff spreads online, often with zero checks. You can see how bad actors jump on that.
Yeah, and it chips away at trust, doesn't it? Confidence in, democratic institutions just goes down.
Totally.
And what I found really worrying was this idea that even if you warn people, like, hey, this video might be a deep fake, it doesn't necessarily make them better at spotting them.
That's a really tricky aspect.
Yeah.
It highlights just how tough it's becoming to tell real from fake.
It really makes you wonder, if we can't even trust our own eyes and ears, how are we supposed to make informed choices as voters?
Exactly the dilemma.
So let's make this concrete. We saw some pretty stark examples just recently, right? Bangladesh in January, Pakistan in February, parliamentary elections there.
Yeah, absolutely. Those were really telling cases.
Yeah.
In Bangladesh, there were loads of reports about disinformation flying around. Facebook even took down pages, accounts for what they called coordinated inauthentic behavior, so organized campaigns.
Okay.
And the AFP fact-checkers, they found this whole campaign back in September 2023
Oh.
using fake experts writing opinion pieces.
Wow, fake experts.
Yep. And on top of that, there was the whole controversy around the Digital Security Act being used against people who were criticizing the government online.
In Pakistan?
Pakistan was maybe even more direct with the deepfakes. Political parties were definitely using them.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah. Accounts pushing out AI-generated voices, supposedly the former prime minister, his legal advisor telling people to boycott the election.
No way.
And then the former PM himself, Imran Khan, who was in jail and disqualified,
Yeah.
he announced he'd won using a synthesized voice. Some news outlets even reported it as real at first.
That's incredible.
It is. And his party, PTI, they accused the other main party, the PMLN, of using deepfakes too. It was messy.
Yeah.
And Indonesia's election in February. Same sorts of deepfake problems there as well.
So these examples from Asia, they're not just isolated things. They feel like, well, a warning shot for elections coming up in Europe, here in the U.S.
I think that's exactly right. It shows the potential for disruption is very real.
Okay, so if that's the threat landscape, how are governments trying to fight back? Let's look at the EU. You mentioned them earlier. They seem to be taking some pretty proactive steps.
They are, yeah. There was this EDMO task force report looking at the 2023 European elections. They analyzed like 900 fact checks from 11 different elections.
And what did they find?
Well, widespread disinformation specifically about the process of elections. Lots of bogus claims about voter fraud, foreign meddling, unfairness. But interestingly, the specific narratives kind of varied from country to country.
Okay. So that report probably pushed them to gear up for the 2024 EU Parliament elections.
Absolutely. And their approach is pretty multi-layered. You've got new laws, collaboration with the tech platforms, and big public awareness drives.
Let's talk about the laws. The Digital Services Act, the DSA.
Right, the DSA, that's a big one. So under the DSA, the really large online platforms, Facebook, TikTok, they have until August 2025 to get systems in place to identify and clearly label manipulated content, including deepfakes.
So more transparency for users.
That's the core idea. Make it clearer when something isn't what it seems.
And then there's the AI Act that just got finalized, right?
It did. And this is huge. It's basically the world's first comprehensive law, specifically for AI.
Wow.
Yeah. The goal is to tackle deepfake risks through transparency rules, who made it, how it's put out there, but also banning certain types of harmful deepfakes and requiring really strict risk assessments for AI that's considered high risk.
High risk. How do they define that?
They've got this really interesting risk-based system. It's sort of tiered.
Okay.
So minimal risk is stuff like, I don't know, spam filters,
Yeah.
video games, no real threat.
Right.
Then limited risk,
Right.
like chatbots. They just need to be transparent, tell you you're talking to an AI, let you switch it off easily.
It makes sense.
Then you get to high risk. This is where it gets serious. Facial recognition, surgical robots, algorithms supporting job applications, anything that can really impact people's lives or rights. These get heavy scrutiny assessment all the way through.
Okay, so that's where the real regulation kicks in.
Exactly. And then there's the top tier, unacceptable risk, stuff that's just too dangerous. Government social scoring, exploiting kids' vulnerabilities, subliminal manipulation. That stuff is outright banned.
Banned completely.
Yep, gone. So it tries to match the rules to the actual potential harm. It's pretty groundbreaking, really setting a global benchmark.
That framework sounds impressive, definitely. But it brings up something you mentioned earlier. The AI Act seems focused on marking content, right? Watermarking, labeling.
Largely, yes. Transparency is key.
But what about detecting and removing the stuff after it's already out there spreading? Does marking it even help if people aren't savvy enough to understand the labels or know what to do?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a really critical point. Marking helps, but it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
Which is why the EU is also pushing the tech companies really hard to develop better tools to actually detect and remove deepfakes, especially around election time.
So we've seen things like TikTok and Meta setting up special election centers and fact-checking hubs for the EU elections.
Exactly. And alongside that, big investments in public awareness, teaching people how to spot fakes, promoting media literacy, just encouraging that habit of double-checking information.
And trying to get everyone working together. Platforms, fact-checkers, law enforcement.
Yeah, fostering that cooperation is vital. They've even called for like an independent European network of fact-checkers to help coordinate things.
So if you're listening, what's the bottom line here? Potential upsides, more transparency, maybe better removal of bad stuff, citizens getting smarter about media.
Hopefully. But the challenges are huge, too. Just the sheer volume of content online, how fast it changes.
And balancing free speech with stopping harm, that's always tricky.
Always.
Yeah.
Plus, ensure the fact-checkers themselves are accurate, neutral. That's crucial for trust.
So it's not a simple fix. It's going to need constant work, constant adaptation.
Absolutely. Ongoing collaboration is the only way it works long-term.
Okay, let's pivot a bit. We've talked about the EU's approach. How did a big tech platform like Meta actually handle this massive 2024 election year? They've been dealing with this since 2016, right?
They have, and their approach has definitely evolved. They have a dedicated team working across the company on this. Election operations center set up all over the place. U.S., Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, EU, UK, Mexico, Brazil. It's a global effort for them.
And what's their main challenge from their perspective?
Well, they talk a lot about that balancing act, letting people speak freely versus keeping the platform safe. And they've been pretty upfront, actually, saying their error rates in enforcing their own policies were just too high in the past.
So they've tried to fix that.
Yeah, updating policies for fairness has been a big focus. Like, they rolled out controls so you can choose to see less recommended political content on Facebook, Instagram, Threads if you want.
Giving users more control.
Right. And clarifying rules around election talk. Basically, asking questions about the process in your normal posts. Fine. But claiming corruption or fraud and adding a threat of violence, not okay.
And ads are different.
Yep. Paid ads questioning election legitimacy, banned since 2020. They've also toughened up penalties for repeat offenders, and they do yearly audits on hate speech terms to keep their detection current.
Okay, so policy tweaks. But what about getting good information out there? Reliable voting info.
That was another huge push. In the U.S., they had these reminders at the top of Facebook and Instagram feeds, got over 1 billion views apparently, and drove like 20 million clicks to official government sites.
1 billion views? Wow.
Yeah. Plus, things like voting alerts over 765 million sent since 2020, and special links in search results pointing to official sources.
And globally, was the reach similar?
Pretty massive numbers globally, too. UK, they reached over 43 million people with reminders. EU, tens of millions of interactions on Facebook and Instagram. India, a government notification on Facebook hit 145 million users, and they used WhatsApp to reach something like 400 million people.
That's a lot of eyeballs.
It's a huge scale, yeah. Trying to flood the zone with reliable info.
Okay, now the big one, AI's impact. Given everything we talked about earlier, what did Meta actually see on their platforms?
This is maybe the most surprising part of the report. It basically said that all the early warnings about, a massive wave of deepfakes and AI-driven disinformation campaigns, it largely didn't happen in a big way on their platforms.
Really? After all the hype?
Yeah. They said actual cases of AI being used in election stuff was really low volume, like less than 1% of all the election misinformation they fact-checked involved AI.
Do they have examples?
One concrete one they gave? Their AI image generator, Imagine, apparently rejected almost 600,000 requests to create pictures of key political figures just in the month before the U.S. election.
Blocking it at the source.
Seems like it. And they found that even for those organized disinformation groups, the CIB network's generative AI only gave them small incremental advantages.
So AI wasn't a game changer for those groups?
Not according to Meta. They argue that because they focused on detecting the behavior of the coordination, the fake accounts, they could disrupt these operations whether they used AI or not. The underlying tactics were often the same.
Interesting. And they mentioned industry cooperation, too.
Yeah, things like signing the AI elections accord with other tech companies. And specific projects. Like in India, they supported a WhatsApp tip line that had a special unit just for analyzing deepfakes, a world first, they said, and helping fact-checkers in Europe.
So less AI impact than expected, but what about good old-fashioned foreign interference?
No.
Still a problem.
Oh, absolutely. They took down about 20 new covert influence operations globally just in the run-up. And the main sources, still Russia, overwhelmingly. They've disrupted 39 Russian networks since 2017.
Wow. Who else?
Iran is second, with 31 networks taken down, followed by China with 11. So those state actors are definitely still very active.
And how effective are these networks, really?
Well, Meta's analysis suggests many of them actually struggle to build real audiences. They often rely on buying fake likes or followers to look bigger than they are.
So smoke and mirrors.
A lot of it, yeah. And interestingly, they saw many of these operations shifting activity off Meta's platforms and onto places with maybe fewer checks and balances, like X or Telegram. They found fake Russian videos about the U.S. election there, for example, not so much on Facebook or Instagram.
Trying to find easier targets.
Looks that way. It suggests that tougher enforcement might be having some effect, pushing them elsewhere.
And you mentioned something called the doppelganger operation earlier?
Yes, doppelganger. That's a particularly persistent one. It's this huge network of fake websites designed to look exactly like real news sites, spreading disinformation. Meta says they've exposed over 6,000 of these fake domains since 2022.
6,000.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Even when they take them down, new ones pop up almost immediately. It's like this constant, exhausting game of digital whack-a-mole. Shows just how relentless these efforts are.
A sobering reminder of the ongoing battle. Okay, so we've dug into AI, tech platforms, foreign interference, but protecting democracy isn't just about fighting the bad stuff online, right? It's also about understanding the voters themselves.
Absolutely crucial.
Let's shift gears then, talk about youth voting, especially in the U.S. context. Now, it's important to say up front, it's probably too early for solid conclusions on 2024 youth turnout, right? Lots of votes still being counted. Early numbers are mostly survey-based.
Exactly. Those initial reports can be shaky.
Yeah.
Which raises the key question, how do we get good, reliable data on youth voting? Because we've seen conflicting surveys already.
Right. Tell us about that, the CBS exit poll versus the AP Fox one.
Yeah, so the CBS exit poll, that's a pretty big sample, like 200,000 voters surveyed as they actually left the polling places or voted early.
Okay, actual voters.
Actual voters. And it found that young people, 18-29, favored Harris by about 11 points. Younger ones, 18-24, by 12 points. It also showed this really wide gender gap. Young men slightly for Trump, +2, young women strongly for Harris, +24, and young black voters showing much stronger support for Harris than other young demographics.
Okay, so that's CBS. What about AP Fox?
That was different. Smaller sample size included non-voters. Some respondents were paid,
Yeah.
and it found 18-29-year-olds only favored Harris by 6 points. And the gender numbers were way different. 2 young men supposedly +14 for Trump, young women only +18 for Harris. Very different picture.
Very different indeed. So which one should you, listening at home, put more stock in?
Well, most analysts lean towards the CBS poll being closer to reality.
Why is that?
Better at methodology, actual exit poll, not just a broad survey. Much larger sample size. And frankly, the results just look more normal. They align better with historical trends and pre-election polling for different age groups, whereas the AP Fox numbers were kind of outliers, hard to explain.
Okay, so CBS likely more reliable. And why is this distinction so important?
Because it helps us challenge that pervasive narrative you always hear about, apathetic youth, low turnout.
Right, you often see headlines saying youth turnout is under 50%.
Exactly. But those figures usually measure turnout among all young citizens, registered or not. And they're often based on those less reliable surveys like the AP Fox one.
Ah, okay. So it's not turnout among people who could actually vote because they're registered.
Precisely. And this is where it gets really interesting. If you look at data from groups like the Civic Center, focusing specifically on registered young voters,
What does that show?
it shows that in every single presidential election from 2004 to 2020, over 75% of registered 18 to 24-year-olds actually voted nationally.
75%.
Yeah.
That's way higher than the narrative suggests.
Way higher. And it's very likely the rate for registered youth was similar in 2024.
Yeah.
So the idea that young people just don't show up once they're registered, it's largely a myth.
So if we see a low overall youth turnout number, counting everyone, registered or not, what is that actually telling us?
It's telling us about several different problems all at once. It reflects challenges with getting young people registered in the first place, issues with civic education, maybe motivation, the effectiveness of mobilization efforts. It's not just about election day apathy.
Okay, that reframes the problem significantly.
It really does.
So the big takeaway for you here is maybe focusing all the energy and money on just last-minute get-out-the-vote drives for young people isn't the smartest move.
It might be a misallocation, yeah. Especially if the more fundamental stuff like high school voter registration, comprehensive civic education, if that's being radically underfunded.
Right.
The most direct, probably most helpful thing we could do is just get more young people registered, starting when they're still in high school, before they scatter.
Makes sense. Get them on the rolls early.
And you have to remember, this is constant. 4 million kids turn 18 every single year in the U.S. By 2026, that's another 8 million newly eligible voters. So there's really no off year when it comes to high school voter registration. That pipeline is always filling up. That's a message the whole pro-democracy community really needs to absorb.
And are there groups working on this, getting better data?
Yeah. The Civic Center, for example, they do great work publishing reliable turnout data based on official voter files, state records. And they run campaigns like CAP, Gown and Ballot in the spring, training students and teachers to run registration drives in high schools. It's about building that civic foundation early.
Building the foundation, not just the last-minute scramble? Okay, so let's try and bring all these threads together. We've gone from the global threat of AI fakes messing with elections.
Yeah, challenging integrity everywhere.
To the really detailed steps the EU is taking with things like the AI Act.
A really complex regulatory response.
To what big platforms like Meta actually saw, which was maybe less AI chaos than feared, but still tons of foreign interference.
Right, a more nuanced picture there.
And then finally looking at youth voting and realizing the story is much more about registration and early engagement than just turnout numbers.
Exactly. All these pieces, they're deeply interconnected when we talk about keeping democracy healthy.
Okay.
The EU's AI Act, Meta's observations, they show this ongoing, evolving fight against digital manipulation. But the youth voting data, that's a reminder that some really basic stuff like getting kids registered in high school is just as fundamental as fighting deepfakes. You need both.
You definitely need both. So, the final thought, the thing for you to chew on. As AI gets easier and easier for anyone to use, how will governments and tech platforms keep up? That adaptation challenge is huge.
It really is.
And alongside that, what's the role of just continuous civic education? Starting really young, empowering people like you to actually navigate this increasingly complicated world, to think critically about the information you see every day. How vital is that going to be?